I have always believed that the worst kind of pain is not the kind that arrives with screaming and chaos. It is the quiet kind. The kind that sneaks up on you dressed in something ordinary. A birthday cake, a familiar street, a chair in a room you thought you knew. The kind that introduces itself, not with a shout, but with a single, devastating detail that your brain registers before your heart is ready. For me, that detail was a pale blue silk top with tiny pearl buttons running down the front. My wife Priya had worn it on a Tuesday 3 weeks before. I remembered because she had looked beautiful in it. The kind of beautiful that still catches you off guard after 8 years of marriage. She had twirled once in front of the bathroom mirror, laughed at herself for twirling, and then kissed me on the cheek before heading out to what she called a lunch with the girls. I had waved from the front door like a man who had absolutely nothing to worry about, which was exactly what I was, or so I believed. I found that top on a Thursday afternoon in late November, draped over the back of a wooden chair in my best friend Rohan's living room. Let me tell you about Rohan first, because you cannot understand what finding that top meant without understanding what Rohan meant to me. We had been friends since we were 11 years old. We grew up on the same street in Pune, rode bicycles together until our knees were perpetually grazed, failed our 10th grade mathematics examination together, and consoled each other through the particular humiliation of that failure with stolen mangoes from the neighbor's tree. When his father died during our second year of college, I was the one who sat with him on the floor of his kitchen at 2 a.m. while he cried into a cup of tea he never drank. When my mother was diagnosed with a heart condition the following year, he drove 3 hours to be with me the same evening I called him, arriving with nothing but a bag of her favorite biscuits and the steadiness of someone who understood that sometimes presence is the only language grief accepts. We had been through everything together. His 2 broken engagements, my rocky first year of marriage. The business venture we had both sunk savings into that collapsed spectacularly and taught us, expensively, that neither of us had any talent for the restaurant industry. Through all of it, Rohan had been the person I called first. Before my brother, before my parents, before anyone. His birthday fell on the 23rd of November. I had never once missed it in 23 years. I arrived at his apartment in Bandra at around 4 in the afternoon, carrying a bottle of single malt whiskey that I knew he had been eyeing for months and a card that his nephew had helped me pick because the boy had better taste than I did. I had texted ahead. He had responded with a thumbs-up emoji, which was Rohan's version of, "I am thrilled to see you and consider you among the most important people in my life." We had known each other long enough that I could translate his minimalism fluently. His front door was slightly ajar when I arrived, the way it sometimes was when he was expecting people. I knocked twice out of habit, pushed it open, and walked in calling his name the way you do in a house that has always felt like a second home. The living room was the first thing I saw. It was a comfortable room, second-hand bookshelves, a television larger than the room really warranted, a cluster of mismatched cushions on the sofa that somehow worked, a wooden dining chair near the window that he used as a makeshift coat rack whenever he was too lazy to use the actual one by the door. The top was on that chair. I registered it the way your brain sometimes registers something wrong before you can name what it is. A half-second of unease, a small wrongness in the composition of the room, before your conscious mind catches up and tells you what your instincts already knew. Pale blue silk, pearl buttons, the particular way it was folded and draped, slightly hurried, the way clothing lands when someone removes it quickly rather than tidily. I knew that top. I had watched my wife button it up in front of a bathroom mirror. For a moment, I simply stood there, holding a bottle of whiskey and a birthday card, while the room rearranged itself around me into something I did not recognize. Then Rohan walked in from the hallway. He saw me before I could rearrange my face into anything neutral. I know this because of what happened to his, the specific, unmistakable sequence of expressions that crossed it in the space of 2 seconds. Surprise first, the genuine kind. Then recognition of what I was looking at. Then something I had never seen on Rohan's face in 23 years of friendship. Guilt, so raw and immediate that it looked almost like physical pain. He stopped walking. His shoulders went rigid. His eyes met mine for one fraction of a second and then slid away to somewhere above my left ear, finding a spot on the wall that had suddenly become deeply interesting. "Hey," he said. His voice was careful, in a way Rohan's voice was never careful with me. "You're early." And right there, in the space between his hey and his comment about timing, was everything I needed to know. Not in the top. Not even in my own thundering heart. In the way my best friend of 23 years could not look me in the eye. I do not entirely remember the next few minutes. I remember setting the whiskey bottle down on his coffee table very slowly, as though it were made of something fragile. I remember that my hands were steady, which surprised me, because inside I felt like a building whose foundations had just been quietly removed. I remember Rohan saying my name, Vikram, in a voice that sounded nothing like him, thin and reaching. And I remember holding up one hand to stop him from continuing, because I knew, with total certainty, that I could not bear to hear whatever explanation was coming while I was still standing in that room. "I'm going to go," I said. "Vikram, please." "I'm going to go," I said again, because I needed to say it twice to make it feel like something I was actually capable of doing. I left the whiskey on his table. I kept the birthday card, which I realized only later when I found it crumpled in my jacket pocket. I walked out of his apartment and down 3 flights of stairs instead of taking the lift because I needed the time the stairs gave me, the physical counting of steps, the mechanical placement of one foot in front of the other. I sat in my car in the parking lot below his building for 45 minutes. I did not cry. I want to say that I sat there with great dignity and composure, processing the situation with maturity and restraint. The truth is that I did not cry, simply because I could not. The feeling was too large for tears. It was the kind of feeling that sits in your chest like a stone, too heavy for any ordinary emotional response, requiring something your body has not yet developed the vocabulary for. My phone lit up 3 times. Rohan. I did not answer. Then once from a number I did not recognize. I ignored it. Then Priya. I stared at her name on the screen for so long that the call went to voicemail. Then I listened to the voicemail, which was her asking what time I would be home for dinner. Her voice warm and ordinary and completely undisturbed, and I thought, she does not know I went to Rohan's today. I had not mentioned it to her. She thought I was working late. I drove home. There is a particular hell in sitting across a dinner table from someone you love while carrying knowledge you have not yet decided what to do with. Priya made dal and rice that evening, my favorite, and talked about a disagreement she had witnessed at her office between 2 colleagues, and asked me if I wanted to watch something after dinner. And I sat across from her and answered in monosyllables that she attributed to tiredness, and I let her attribute it to tiredness because I was not ready. Not ready for what, exactly? I could not have told you. I was not even certain of what I knew. I knew I had seen her top at Rohan's apartment. I knew Rohan's reaction, but I had not spoken to either of them. I had not asked any questions. I had taken my single piece of evidence and my best friend's guilty face and built a verdict in a parking lot, and some small, desperate part of me was still arguing that I could be wrong. That part of me did not believe itself. But I let it speak anyway, because the alternative was sitting at that dinner table in the full knowledge of what I suspected, and I was not capable of that yet. I went to bed before Priya. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and went through every possible explanation. She had visited Rohan at some point and left the top there. But why and when and why had neither of them mentioned it? The top had been there for weeks, and I had simply never noticed it on previous visits. But I had not visited Rohan's apartment in over a month, and the top had been worn 3 weeks ago. Someone else had left a top that looked identical, and here the argument collapsed completely, because I knew that top. I knew it the way you know something that belongs to the person you have shared a home and a bed and a life with for 8 years. I did not sleep. Rohan called me 4 more times over the next 2 days. I did not answer. On the third day, he sent a message that said, "Vikram, I need to speak to you. Please. Not over the phone. Please meet me." I read it and put my phone face down on my desk and sat staring at the wall for a very long time. I called him back that evening. We met at the small Irani cafe near Churchgate, where we had been meeting to talk about serious things since we were in our 20s. The kind of place with marble-top tables and chairs that scraped loudly on the floor, and chai that arrived in scratched glasses and was somehow always exactly right. We had negotiated careers and heartbreaks and family crises over those marble-top tables. I had not imagined adding this to the list. Rohan arrived before me. He was already at our usual table, and he looked, there is no other word for it, terrible. 3 days of not sleeping lived on his face. He had clearly not been eating properly. He stood up when he saw me come in, which was a thing he never did, and the gesture, so formal, so careful, so unlike us, made something twist painfully in my chest because it confirmed that this was real. We did not stand up for each other. We dropped into chairs and reached across for each other's chai. We were not people who stood up. I sat down without saying anything. He sat down. The waiter brought chai without being asked, which was one of the small reliefs of a place that knew you well. Rowan put his hands flat on the table and looked at them for a moment before looking at me. "It happened twice," he said. "The last time was over a month ago. It's over. It was never. I'm not trying to minimize it by saying that. I know it doesn't matter. But I need you to know that it's finished, that I ended it, that it was the worst decision of my life, and I have not had a single moment of peace since." I listened to him say this. My chai sat untouched. "Why?" I asked. It was the only question I had. He did not offer me an excuse. This, I later came to understand, was the most decent thing he did in the entire disaster. He did not dress it up in the language of loneliness or confusion or emotional complexity, all the comfortable explanations people reach for when they have done something indefensible. He looked at me and said, "There is no reason that would make this acceptable. I have none to give you. I made a choice, twice, that I knew was wrong both times, and I'm not going to ask you to understand it because I don't understand it myself." "Did you think about me?" I asked. "When it was happening? Did my face come into your head at any point?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "And?" "And I made the choice anyway," he said. "Both times." I sat with that for a long moment. Outside, the street was doing what Mumbai streets always do, going about its relentless business, entirely indifferent to the particular implosion happening at a marble-top table inside a cafe. "I don't know what to do with this," I said finally. And that was the truest thing I had said in 3 days. I went home that evening and told Priya what I knew. I am not going to write about that conversation in detail, because some things belong only to the people inside them, and that night belongs to Priya and me in a way I am unwilling to give away to the wider world. What I will say is that she did not lie to me. She sat across from me in our living room, on the sofa where we had spent 8 years of evenings, and she told me the truth in a voice that shook so badly it was almost unrecognizable, and she did not try to blame circumstances or feelings or the complexity of what she called a bad period in our marriage. She said, "I did something unforgivable. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I know what I did." I do not know what I had expected. Denial, maybe. The defensive anger that I had heard about from friends who had been through similar things. The pivot from confession to accusation. I had braced for something I would need to fight against. I had not prepared for her honesty, which was somehow harder to hold than anger would have been. I slept on the sofa that night, and the next night, and the night after that. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life, stranger even than the night in the parking lot, because at least that night had the clarifying force of shock. What came after was murkier. I went to work. I ate meals. I had conversations with colleagues about quarterly targets and project timelines, and I was, by all external appearances, a functional person. Inside, I was doing the exhausting and continuous work of trying to figure out who I was in this new version of my life. This version where my wife had betrayed me and my best friend had helped her do it. I spoke to my brother Anand about it. He was 4 years older than me and had always been the more measured of us, the one who thought 3 steps ahead before reacting. He listened to everything I told him without interruption, which took considerable restraint given his personality. And then he asked me one question. What do you want, Vikram? Not what do you think you should want, or what makes the most sense, or what anyone else would do. What do you actually want? It was the right question, and I hated him for it, because I did not know the answer. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Ashwin Kulkarni, a quiet man with a calm office in Anteri and the gift of asking questions that felt simple until you tried to answer them. I had never been to therapy before. I had always thought, in the way of people who have never needed it, that it was something for other people's problems. I discovered that I had been wrong about this, along with a number of other things. Over weeks of conversations with Dr. Kulkarni, I started to understand something that my pride had been obscuring. My marriage had not been as solid as I had believed it was. Not broken. I do not want to overstate this, but not as solid. Priya and I had been in a long, quiet drift, the kind that is easy to miss because nothing dramatic marks it, just a gradual accumulation of evenings spent in separate rooms and conversations that stayed on the surface, and physical closeness that had become infrequent and then rare without either of us naming what was happening. We had both, I think, been waiting for the other to say something, and neither of us had. This did not excuse what she did. I want to be clear about that, because I think there is a tendency in the stories people tell about betrayal to eventually arrive at, but the marriage was already broken, as though this transforms the betrayal into something other than what it is. It does not. What Priya did was a choice. What Rohan did was a choice. The condition of my marriage did not make those choices for them. But it mattered that I understood it, because understanding it meant I was not navigating this with an entirely false picture of things. 6 months after I found the top on that chair, Priya and I are still married. I say this knowing it will surprise some people, perhaps disappoint others who wanted a cleaner ending, the satisfying narrative of betrayal leading to departure. Life, I have found, is less interested in clean endings than stories are. We are in couples therapy now, with a woman named Dr. Suhasini Patwardhan, who does not allow either of us to be comfortable for very long. It is not a pleasant process. It involves saying things to each other that we have spent years not saying, and hearing things we would have preferred not to hear, and sitting with the discomfort of understanding that the betrayal did not happen in a vacuum, even as we acknowledged that it was still a choice, still a wound, still something that fundamentally altered the landscape of us. I do not know yet if we will make it. I think Priya does not know either, and for the first time in our marriage we are being honest about not knowing, which is perhaps the first genuinely new thing between us in years. What I know is that we are trying, and that the trying is real, and that some mornings I wake up next to her and feel something that resembles the beginning of understanding, and other mornings I wake up and feel the stone in my chest as heavy as it was in that parking lot. And both of these things are true simultaneously, and I have stopped expecting one to neatly win out over the other. Rowan and I have not spoken since the cafe. This is the loss that still sits with me in ways I find difficult to articulate. The marriage I am fighting for, the friendship, I do not know how to fight for that. I do not know if I want to. I do not know if wanting to would be a sign of great maturity, or a sign that I have not yet fully reckoned with what he did. Dr. Kulkarni says there is no correct answer to that, which is the kind of thing therapists say that is both true and deeply unhelpful. What I know about Rowan is this. He was my best friend for 23 years, and that is not nothing. 23 years of genuine love and loyalty and showing up, of sitting on kitchen floors at 2 a.m, of driving 3 hours with a bag of biscuits because someone needed you there. All of that was real. The betrayal was also real. I am not sophisticated enough yet to know how to hold both of those truths in the same hand without one of them burning me. Maybe that sophistication comes later. Maybe it doesn't come at all. Maybe some losses are simply losses, without resolution or redemption or the comfort of a lesson learned. What I have learned, the only thing I am certain I have learned, is that the quiet moments are where everything lives, not the dramatic ones, not the confrontations or the confessions or the long sleepless nights. The quiet moments, a woman twirling in front of a mirror in a blue silk top, laughing at herself, a birthday card crumpled in a jacket pocket, a scratched glass of chai cooling on a marble table, a man standing up when you walk into a cafe because he does not know what else to do with his guilt, and that standing up telling you more than anything he could have said. We build our lives in the small details, and we lose them there too. The catastrophes are made of ordinary things, a familiar garment, a friend's averted eyes, the specific silence of a man who cannot find words for what he has done. I still drive past Rohan's building sometimes, when the route takes me that way. I don't stop. I don't know why I even notice it. Maybe because 23 years of friendship leaves marks on the geography of a city, and I am still learning to move through the streets of my life as they are now rather than as I once knew them. Priya bought a new top recently. Green, with small gold buttons. She held it up to show me, and I felt everything at once. Love and grief and anger and something that might have been hope, all of it at the same time, which is apparently just what it is to be alive inside a complicated thing. "Do you like it?" she asked. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. That too was the truth. Not the whole truth, not the uncomplicated truth, but the truth that I could offer on that particular evening in the particular and ongoing project of still being here, still trying, still learning what it means to love someone after you have understood them more completely than you wanted to. We are still here. That is what I know. We are still here, and some days that feels like enough.